over 900 used vehicles in stock now. That's way more than any other dealer in the area. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got the volume all in one location on the Motor Mile. The Used Car Superstore is your one-stop for cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs. Many have miles in the teens, remaining factory warranties, and some are even local one-owner vehicles. Plus, Sheeler owns the finance company. Getting approved for credit is easy on the Motor Mile with financing options for every budget. We finance your future, not your past. You're a valued customer and not just a number on the Motor Mile. Get more with straightforward pricing and more inventory arriving daily. Over 900 vehicles on the lot ready to choose from. The Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com.
It's a week of giveaways as the Carolina Mudcats come to town June 10th through the 15th to take on the Lynchburg Hillcats. The fun starts on Friday with a Copa-branded Jolly Roger flag giveaway for Pirate Night. Help us strike out cancer on Saturday with the Lavender Hat giveaway and post-game fireworks show. And we wrap up the series with a Father's Day barbecue and a Hillcats bottle opener. Tickets are available at lynchburg-hillcats.com.
You're stepping into the fast lane on the VTRN Sports app. 93.3 FM and 1320 AM Lynchburg, or by asking Alexa or Google Home, open VTRN Sports Lynchburg. Now, take the fast lane through the topics that matter across the Commonwealth. This is the Fast Lane with Ed Lane.
We've all been sports fans. That's part of the reason why we congregate today in the Fast Lane and regularly here on the VTRN Sports app and VTRN Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube, as well as Fast Lane, Ed Lane, Facebook Live, YouTube, and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Which is why yesterday was a really cool day. Low-key, epic sports Sunday. Low-key because it's not football season. It doesn't involve college teams that we cover in the area. But fantastic theater that keeps you captivated and sucked in. And there's a benefit to both of the big epic events that occurred yesterday. French Open, NASCAR at Michigan. Yes, we're the place that's finding a way to blend fire and ice, known as tennis and NASCAR. I don't know which one's fire, which one's ice, but whatever. Blending those two great things together that many people might not have thought. It's summertime. When these things occur during football season, they get drowned out pretty easily. They're not going to see a whole lot of attention. But in spite of that, I hope you'll appreciate yesterday like this.
Perez was that close to being done. And here he is. Championship point in a fifth set tiebreak.
S'il vous plaît.
It's over! Carlos Alcaraz reigns in Roland Garros.
6-7, 6-4, 7-6, 7-6.
Not a lot there for Brian Anderson of TNT, which some people will criticize, but to me, one of the marks of great broadcasters is the ability to let the moment breathe when an epic moment happens. God rest his soul, but Pat Summerall, to me, was the first one that I really thought did a good job of that. But Marv Albert was great at it. Doc Emmerich in hockey, maybe the greatest broadcaster of all time. If you can get all those Russian and Finland and all those Eastern European names figured out in the Norwegian names and pronounce them perfectly like he did, that's a skill. But Roland Garros yesterday delivered. It was as good of a singles match as I can recall. And I don't go back to Bjorg McEnroe back in 1980. I was born in 1985, just for full disclosure, as you could find out just by looking at my ID. But the best one I've seen in maybe my lifetime. Now, Djokovic, Federer, Wimbledon 2019 to me probably was more consequential in the career definition of those two players. Federer to that point had not beaten Novak Djokovic in a best of 5 match since 2012. He did not win that, and he has not won against Novak Djokovic in a best of 5 since 2012. But that was the opportunity, that 2019 one, for Djokovic to seal that determination. That, with all due respect to all the Federer fans out there, Novak was better. Novak's more accomplished. Novak, probably driven by Federer kind of turning his nose up at him early in his career. And so Novak, part of the reason I like him, of course, but drove that just straight into the ground, just relentlessness. But there are other ones that come out to mind. I think you could argue easily, maybe the greatest singles match till yesterday was Wimbledon 2008, when Nadal finally broke through on grass and beat Roger Federer on his best surface. And at the time, Djokovic had not come onto the scene. So those were the two preeminent rivals in tennis at the time. Second and third greatest tennis players of all time. Pick your order, Nadal, Federer, which one you prefer. I'll go Nadal second. Many will go Fed, but, Novak's the GOAT. But you look at what happened yesterday. Triple match point for Jannik Sinner. Alcaraz saves it. It was on his serve, so keep that in mind. But he ends up breaking Sinner again, predictably, and then all of a sudden wins the fourth set, goes to a fifth set, wins sets in tiebreakers. Every set Carlos Alcaraz won yesterday was in a tiebreaker. And the two sets that Jannik Sinner won, two of the three sets that Alcaraz won yesterday were in tiebreakers, and one of the two that Sinner won were in tiebreakers. The two that didn't go to tiebreakers were 6-4. It was as narrow as you'll find for a singles match. And it was fantastic theater for those of us that just like sports, that love the excitement of watching sports. Yesterday brought that. And then at the end of the day yesterday, there's NASCAR. And bringing this, which also brings a level of theater to cap off what was a really exciting race at Michigan.
Daddy, I'm sorry, but I beat your favorite driver, folks.
I gotta ask, like Marty did, who's that?
All of them.
Denny Hamlin, or D-Bag Denny Hamlin, as one of my former colleagues once termed him. He said the full thing out, and it actually kind of rhymes better to go full, but we try to keep it PG here in the fast lane. Look, this was great theater yesterday. I get it. What happens in the NFL playoffs or the NBA playoffs or the NHL? By the way, 2 overtime games and 2 Stanley Cup final games so far. They've been split. Florida won the one on Friday. Edmonton won the first one. They go back game 3 tonight, VTR and Sports app, between Edmonton and Florida from South Beach. This is epic theater in sports. And let's again caveat that. I can fully get on board with the idea that this is not what you'll find as the biggest in other areas, but take a moment to just appreciate this. Look, college has got chaos. We're going to get into that a bit today in the fast lane and covering the Commonwealth with the House settlement and how it impacts Virginia, Jerry Ratcliffe, Tech, David Cunningham, JMU, Shane Metlin, and Liberty, John Manson. But what it also gives us a chance to do this past weekend is just take a moment and say, wow, that was really cool. That was awesome. And the tennis side, let's unpack that a little bit more to start off in the fast lane. I don't believe tennis is ever going to get to the level of your biggest American professional sports. It's just not. It's harder to gain access to than others. It's more niche. But I'd love to see it at least elevated to the level that you'll find golf. You'll certainly find NASCAR. NASCAR is consistently, maybe not the peaks are as high as the Grand Slams in golf, but NASCAR generally will often win the weekend overall when it's your random event in the PGA, random tennis event, and random NASCAR race, and F1. NASCAR does better than all of them. So it's more steady across the board. But tennis, I do think what we saw yesterday has the potential to elevate tennis. Again, let's not get carried away here in the fast lane. Part of the reason why Alcaraz gets maybe more acclaim than Sinner, even though, not just because Carlos Alcaraz, has won the last 4 Grand Slam matchups, or has won the last 4 matchups against Jannik Sinner, including 2 at Roland Garros. But they really are split. Hard courts are great for Sinner. Natural surfaces, clay and grass, are great for Carlos. Let's look at this from a bigger view, though, for a second in the fast lane. When do Jannik Sinner's victories occur? U.S. Open, start of football season. Australian Open, end of football season, around conference championship games in the Super Bowl. They're not going to get the same level of attention, at least domestically, from sports coverage. It's just not going to happen. And I'm again, this is not tennis defender here, blaming that. I think that's logical. If you're telling us here in the fast lane where our attention goes in the fall and in the winter, when the U.S. tennis and Australian Open tennis Grand Slams are happening, they're not toward those events to the same depth that they are when it comes to the clay and then coming up within the next couple of weeks, grass over the next month and change. But I'm not going to dispute either what John McEnroe had to say yesterday on TNT. And my wife, by the way, my wife's a big Rafael Nadal fan, and she loves Carlos Alcaraz now. She cannot separate that from her ability to like discern what quality broadcasting is, particularly when that's going on. By the way, TJ, let me ask you this before we get to the John McEnroe point.
Time to take a detour in the fast lane.
It won't be long, and I am about to send off the liners to get the back on track in the fast lane so we can have one of those. Just curious, do you believe in the broadcaster jinx at all?
Yes, actually, I do.
So to a large extent, I do as well. Like, I will never forget, this was a Saints-Ravens football game. This is how just sick my memory is years ago. This was back in Justin Tucker. Before the women said,
rejected,
and he might have plowed through them. Yes, we just went there here in the fast lane. Justin Tucker was actually a good kicker at that time, so it would have been harder to cut him for underperformance. And, I stopped counting at like 13. There may be more. Please forgive me to the other ladies. But again, like Deshaun Watson, I just lose track and presume you're guilty if that many people come forward. I know we're off on a detour. But they showed the stat for Justin Tucker. Like, he's made his last 50 extra points or his last 50 field goals from inside 49. He's got a kick to tie the game. You know what happens, right?
Oh, he missed it.
100%. Pushed it wide right. Famous words, of course, if you're a Miami fan, put up the U for a second because wide right to our Florida State choppers out there may not like it. But my wife subscribes to the theory of broadcaster jinx. So she was zipping me yesterday, providing just what I would like to call legitimate analysis. I know I'd use the adverb and the adjective both, but legitimate analysis yesterday. I'd like to think I provided them. My wife tried to put the kibosh on that. Oh. And we're watching the match yesterday, and it really is thrilling. And again, what we got yesterday, Carlos and Sinner are really, we saw yesterday, they're neck and neck in men's tennis. Carlos will get more acclaim because, he's doing what he's doing when football is not sucking the oxygen out of the media coverage room of sports. And this is not me hating on Carlos Alcaraz. He won yesterday fair and square. Again, full disclosure, I had him at 1.8 to 1 twice, and at 5 to 1 to win in 5 sets, 1.8 to 1 pre-tournament to win the thing. So I made out pretty well yesterday. I unfortunately was not paying attention when he was at triple match point and threw something down at 60 to 1 odds to try to claim that. Again, sorry, honey, we don't have a few $1,000s. We only have a few hundred from yesterday. But when you're wagering $30 on events, just take it and be glad. So anyway, where we're going with this is this. What we saw yesterday, the thrilling nature of it, and the fact that it is the first of the 2 summer Grand Slams, it has the potential to lead into Wimbledon. Is tennis going to supplant the NFL? No, nothing is. On a global level, is tennis going to supplant European soccer when 400 million people tune into the Champions League final? Not that many in the U.S., like 2.5 million, but globally, it's the most watched sporting event. No way. It's not going to come close. Is tennis going to supplant college football, the NBA, big American sports? No. But is there room for growth? Yes. And that's where yesterday is a good thing if you like the sport. And frankly, if you just want something entertaining to watch before we get back to football season, especially here in the Commonwealth when all of our teams have been knocked out of the College World Series. There wasn't much in lacrosse and even the college softball as well, Liberty Super Regionals, but not quite to the championship. So we get this. And for once, I'll actually say I agree with John McEnroe.
In the Wimbledon final, I lost that, but it elevated, I felt, hopefully, the sport a little bit, but me individually. And I think it's definitely going to elevate Yannick, the effort that he put out and the way he handled it at the end, which is really harsh. And I've been there. I know what it feels like to go 2 sets up. If I wasn't match point, but I was 5 points away. So I could taste it.
Yeah.
But he's going to win this. He's going to win this thing. I thought I was going to win it, but I was sadly mistaken.
Well, it's funny, by the way, and that's the thing I appreciate about John McEnroe. Self-deprecating humor has always been something he's interjected, and he's poked fun at his temper tantrums, which, there are plenty of people in sports in general who have that personality, and they still get a little bit sensitive when it's pointed out. Look, if it's who you are, especially if you're not going back and playing, just take ownership of it. But different people view that differently. But John McEnroe brought up a great point. One of them is the loss fueling him. But the other reality is the loss fuels Jannik Sinner, but it keeps people saying, okay, can Sinner now get revenge at Wimbledon? I think the gap is really wide on hard surfaces. Carlos has routinely underperformed and had these just head scratching, I'm staring at the clouds moments on hard. Plus, Sinner, the amount of power he could generate on clay yesterday, that's going to get magnified at Wimbledon, and it already has been, will be magnified when he gets to the hard courts. And if he's playing as well as he is on the hard courts, good luck beating him there. Good luck. But Wimbledon creates that theater of the mind. Plus, the time on the sports calendar is a big part of the reason why, and that's where this deserves a lot of attention. The tension was fantastic yesterday. 3 tiebreak sets. The other 2 sets were 6-4. So it's not like there was a 6-1 clunker thrown in there, which will happen from time to time. You're not going to get that. Rarely do you get this type of theater of the mind. And I get there's a nostalgia crowd that can never bear to admit that yesterday may have been the most epic Grand Slam match. But, I mean, the ones that we're comparing it to didn't last as long. Djokovic, Federer, 2019 Wimbledon. I think that was more significant from career definition, but from a raw tension back and forth moment, I wouldn't quite put it on the level of yesterday, given how even they have been, Sinner and Alcaraz. Again, Nadal, Federer, 2008. I wouldn't quite put it on the level of yesterday. I know for the moment and what it meant for their careers at that time, those were big, much the 2 that I mentioned. But yesterday was more about just the quality of tennis that we saw. Like, the careers have not been defined by Alcaraz and Sinner. Other than to say right now, they're clearly head and shoulders by far the 2 best men's players in tennis. But then for those of us that like sports, we capped that off yesterday, and we'll get more into the nuts and bolts of tennis and NASCAR later this week in the Fast Lane because there is room for that. But you cap it off with yesterday and what we saw at Michigan, which was really good racing. And again, to get my usher on in the Fast Lane, after spending a lot of time, and I even took a break in there to go to church, came back, it was 3rd set, and ended up, 3rd, 4th, and 5th sets between the radio and TV, catching the broadcast for the French Open. But after that, I needed to walk. I needed to get outside. So I plug up the good old MRN app, and convenient plug, but one of the broadcasters, Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network, slated to join us tomorrow at 5:45 in the Fast Lane. They do a fantastic job, and we do look to getting in with Steve Post in a couple of weeks. But what you saw yesterday at Michigan, there was so much strategy that was going on. Side-by-side racing was fantastic. First of all, it's a wide track. It's 2 miles. You add length and width. It made it compelling. You factor in that there were teams with different fuel strategies. Look, I get the criticism around fuel strategies in NASCAR when you're talking about my least favorite place on the planet, Texas Motor Speedway. More on that. But when you're just talking about the raw quality of racing, and you can bring in good racing plus fuel strategy, that's the thing. The races where fuel strategy is kind of like, if you're watching, please forgive me, but I'm doing the mocking putting deodorant on for those that are watching, Fast Lane, Ed Lane, and VTR and Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube. Some races, fuel mileage at the end is basically putting on deodorant for a stinky race. That was not the case yesterday. It was good, thrilling action back and forth. And it on the edge of your seats till the end, because was Denny Hamlin going to run out of fuel, or were he and his crew chief, Chris Gale, going to unlock the magic formula, which they did, to get the victory? It's not the best NASCAR race of all time, but when you factor in that there have been a lot of races that have underwhelmed in NASCAR this year. Again, where we are on the sports calendar, fewer options. Off night for the Stanley Cup playoffs. The NBA Finals, Game 2, kind of went the way you would have expected after Oklahoma City, best team in the NBA, lost Game 1. They were in control from the get-go against Indiana last night. So you kind of knew that was probably going to be coming. NASCAR delivered yesterday as well. And then on top of that, Denny Hamlin gets the win, or D-Bag Denny, as many people call him. And he, I beat your favorite driver. And then in the lead up to that as well, he's also doing the OHIO, which is what Ohio State fans do, and in particular, mocking the Michigan crowd, playing into the villain role. And is Hamlin kind of hamming it up for that? Yeah, let's keep it real in the Fast Lane. He kind of is leaned in, maybe overboard at times, but listen to the way it was described yesterday during the Prime broadcast. And again, for all my criticism of Dale Earnhardt Jr., the driver, being a little overrated by what fans wanted him to be versus what he was, they wanted to be, and some still think he was, like Dale Sr. Dude won no championships. The GOAT, Dale Sr., won 7. Let's put that to bed. But Dale Jr., the broadcaster, Dale Jr., the personality, he's so good at connecting with fans. Putting him on Prime, by the way, is great because his ability with this podcast network and this connects him to younger fans. But the explanation about what happened with Denny Hamlin yesterday adds to what Denny Hamlin was doing playing into the crowd.
Mentioned the 3 victories this year for Hamlin. Oh, that was a little OSU because we're in Michigan, right? He's kind of jumped on the Buckeye bandwagon, huh?
He knows that it doesn't matter whether they're cheering or booing. They better be making noise. He's leaning into that.
He's leaning into that. It doesn't matter whether they're cheering or booing as long as they're making noise. And look, if anybody's qualified to say that, I mean, obviously, God rest his soul, but if Dale Earnhardt Sr. were here, he's the guy that could say that. If Jeff Gordon were not too busy running Hendrick Motorsports, which is why he stepped away from broadcasting, he could say that. But since those are not really options for broadcasting right now, your next best bet is Dale Earnhardt Jr., who is so well versed in the history of NASCAR. Again, I don't know if Dale had the passion as a driver, but he's had the passion as a historian and just a fan of motorsports. And his ability to convey that is so great. And the way he outlined it yesterday, as simply as he did, about Dale Earnhardt Jr. And we can say it, Denny Hamlin. As long as they're making noise, it's good. But if there's one person who can say it and it usurps what anybody else is going to say, it's Dale Earnhardt Jr. He's driven before. He has won Cup Series races. His dad was the ultimate one who leaned in to that mindset. And you cap off yesterday with that. How compelling was Sunday? Again, we've got plenty of time to discuss the chaos in college sports. We will get to that momentarily in Covering the Commonwealth. But just take a moment and appreciate what we saw yesterday. Tennis, as epic as it gets, it's going to be really hard to top that. NASCAR, they can top it, but it's a good standard racer. And it reminds you there are still times where there is quality racing. Again, ironically, at tracks like Michigan and Kansas, where back in the day, you're like, what in the world? And now it's actually good. You're getting more of that. So it's an optimistic sign, especially in a time where we're just looking for things that can entertain us and take us off some of the off-field concerns that are going on, which we will get to next in the Fast Lane, because when we return, your teams and topics in Covering the Commonwealth, JMU, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. Yes, starting with the most fundamental question. The House settlement was announced over the weekend. What does that mean for your teams? We'll discuss in Covering the Commonwealth next here in the Fast Lane, and keep that feedback coming. Fast Lane Ed Lane, Facebook Live and YouTube, wherever you want to chime in the podcasts, as well as Fastlane Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
At Big Boys Guns, one thing we've learned over a decade serving Central and Southwest Virginia is that you value the freedom to choose. That's why you'll find the largest selection of firearms, silencers, reloading equipment, ammunition, and AR-15 parts, all under one roof. And if it's not in stock, the BigBoysGuns.com web store shops warehouses on a live feed, so you'll know exactly when your product is here. Come see us on Route 460 in Blue Ridge and BigBoysGuns.com. That's Big Boys with a Z, Guns.com.
Come experience history as End Station Theater Company at Randolph College hosts the inaugural Central Virginia Fringe Festival. The Fringe will be a week-long community celebration centered around theatrical works and performances. Running June 14th through the 21st, 16 community groups will be performing 18 productions over 7 days, culminating in the world premiere of End Station original play, Whirlwind. For tickets and information, visit endstationtheater.org.
Car insurance rates are rising rapidly. That's no secret. It's because the cost of medical care for those who are injured and the repair and replacement cost of damaged vehicles is skyrocketing. But what can you do about it? Hi, this is Judd Gardner with Gardner Insurance Solutions in Lynchburg. We've been helping Central Virginia drivers purchase the coverage they need at affordable prices since 1993. Talk with us before you pay again. We represent numerous companies and have many cost-saving strategies. Gardner Insurance Solutions, 434-316-5433.
Have you looked at your home's exterior lately? Do you see faded siding, paint peeling, and wood rotting, windows that are impossible to open and close, and gutters falling off? Call Collins Siding and Windows to transform your home's exterior and save you money on energy costs. Dreaming of a new porch or sunroom? Collins can do that too. Since 1989, Collins Siding and Windows has been transforming homes in Central Virginia. Roofs, windows, siding, gutters, porches, decks, and sunrooms. They can do it all. Call Collins Siding and Windows today, 434-525-6307.
You can do something traditional for a birthday party, or you could rise above the mundane and climb to a whole new level. Book your birthday party at Rise Up Climbing in downtown Lynchburg. Birthday parties on the weekend include harnesses, a personal instructor for 90 minutes, and 30 minutes on the party platform to unwrap gifts and enjoy treats. Rise up to a whole new level for birthday parties at Rise Up Climbing. Learn more at riseupclimbing.com and see them on Church Street in downtown Lynchburg.
Head to lynchburg-hillcats.com to lock in your tickets for the Lynchburg Hillcats this season. Now here's VTR in Sports.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
The $1 million question, actually the multi-million-dollar question, depending on how you look at it, $20 million. House settlement. It's here. It is going to impact teams in our area. We have to get back to that after talking about an epic weekend in sports. What does that mean? Find out now.
It's time for your teams and topics. Covering the Commonwealth, a look at teams and topics from around the Commonwealth. Let's start with the JMU Dukes.
With Shane Metlin at Shane_DNR Sports on Twitter and DNRonline.com. Shane, great to be chatting with you. We appreciate your time as always today in the Fast Lane. The house settlement. This is the blanket question, but it does mean different things, so that's why we get to ask it to everyone. What does this mean for JMU?
Yeah, it means they will start revenue sharing in some form. It's not going to be at the $20.5 million cap that some schools have already announced they're going to be. We don't know exactly how much it'll be for JMU. I get the impression it could be maybe in the $5 to $7 million range, but I haven't gotten an official figure there. So. Yeah, it ushers in a new era in that regard for the Dukes. They're going to be paying their players directly to some degree, but it won't be the same as a lot of the Power Four conferences.
Shane_DNR Sports for Shane Metlin. He's at DNRonline.com. You mentioned it not being the same for JMU as it is for other power conferences. Does this come to a head at some point? Is that a legitimate concern, or are we still in a wait and see?
I think it's a wait and see on a lot of things. They've prepared themselves for, this day, knowing it was probably going to come. There would be revenue sharing of some sort. But I mean, Matt Rowan, the JMU athletic director, when I've talked to him about this, he's not even really. They want to compete on the field. They want to, if they get a chance to play a Virginia Tech, or North Carolina, they want to beat those teams on the field. But they know they're not going to really compete financially. When he talks about it, he wants to be on par with Boise States and Tulane's and Memphis's of the world, which I think is a reasonable goal for JMU. But it is kind of different look at it than maybe we've seen in the past.
So you mentioned the goal not being to compete with your Power 2, certainly, or even Power 4 programs if you're JMU, but being on par with others in their area. How close are they, or is that still a distant work as well?
Yeah, that's still to be seen. I think, not everybody's kind of kept those numbers to themselves so far. I think administrators, athletic directors probably have a better idea maybe what the total payroll, I guess, for athletic departments is going to be than coaches. They guard those numbers incredibly close because they know they're competing against the teams they're trying to recruit against. But I think we'll get a better sense of what a Boise State or Tulane or an Appalachian State or these schools are offering as far as revenue sharing probably in the coming weeks. Some of this information I think has got to become more public as we get into the settlement. But right now it's a lot of questions without a ton of answers.
And one of the ways that problem could be solved is the concept about private equity. You had an interesting point that came out and you tweeted it earlier today at Shane_DNR Sports as it relates to the JMU Dukes. But you tweeted, I'm waiting to talk to a few more people before I write about it, but the Sun Belt had a pretty extensive presentation on private capital funding at its spring meetings. Some ADs seem more intrigued by the idea than others, which brings us to JMU. Where do they fit in on that?
Well, Matt Rohn was the first one to bring it up to me. I asked him, hey, what happened at the meetings? What was interesting? And he said that presentation was interesting to him. And I don't know if that means JMU is definitely going that way, but I think it seems like something they'll certainly explore. I mentioned they want to keep pace with the Boise States of the world. Since I tweeted that, it's come out that Boise State is involved in private equity. It's in some function. We don't know exactly how these are working, and something I want to get more into as I try to report on this, because I wasn't going to even mention it at all. Like, I was going to save it all for kind of dropping the story. But when it came out today that some of these schools are getting involved in it, I just decided to put it out there that I have been kind of paying attention to it, and hopefully I'll get more information, because it seems like I have better questions to ask each and every person I talk to. I started out knowing nothing about it, and I'm sort of getting a little bit more information at this point.
Well, if it's any consolation, Shane, one of the great realities is there's so many questions that if you're dropping this about a story, it doesn't seem like you're shy of angles that you could take on this.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things as I read about it too is it'll be things maybe people hadn't thought about. It's not necessarily, some venture capital firm is going to buy an athletic department, but it may be helping them fund different events or something like that. I think there's some different ways it can go that I didn't really realize. So I'll be I want to just keep digging into it and learn more about it.
Yes, that's a good thing to figure out, at least take a look at. And it makes it interesting. It's another one of these angles. And, I guess it gives us something to discuss during these summer months. Shane, we're glad that you're willing to do that with us. And we will keep it locked to DNRonline.com for when that article actually drops.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Indeed. Shane Metlin with us here in the Fast Lane. Now to the Virginia Tech Hokies with David Cunningham of TechSideline.com. David, there are days where we get real creative with our questions. We might a little bit later in Covering the Commonwealth. Then there are times where we just ask the blank question, and I'm going to try to avoid the talk about blank because that's really lazy. But we see the House settlement coming down at the end of last week. What does that mean for Virginia Tech?
Yeah, great to be with you, Ed. It's a very open-ended question. I think the Hokies are in a really good spot right now as far as the House settlement and how they're going to approach it. With Babcock and Tim Sands, the president and AD, they have kind of laid out the groundwork for this. I think we're going to hear a little bit more this week from Whit Babcock. He's doing a sit-down interview with Bill Ross, just kind of discussing how the Hokies plan to attack this thing. But Virginia Tech, Whit Babcock and Tim Sands kind of talked about it a little bit, that they've got the $20.5 million for next year ready. The interesting part is going to be how they attack everything else that comes in the next couple of years, right? Great. You've got $20.5 million to share among your student athletes, among the various athletic programs, and how they divide that up is going to be really interesting. But the bigger question, I think, is how do you continue to find that $20.5 million every single year? And the great thing is Tim Sands, he's the chair of the D1 Council right now that kind of oversees all of college athletics. He's in the middle of all of these conversations. So if anybody has any questions about it at Virginia Tech, well, the good news is you probably got the most informed president in the country right now as far as a lot of these issues go. So I think the Hokies are in a pretty good spot. But obviously everybody is kind of taking this wild, wild west thing, step by step as we go. And the interesting part here, Ed, is going to be the Deloitte matter and the NIL deals and putting those through a clearinghouse. How much does that actually work? Is it kind of just throwing money under the table again? How real is the clearinghouse? I think we all laugh, but that's the real question here.
I love it. We're going to go back to $500 handshakes and mysteries appearing in players' locker rooms, just like in the good old days.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the tough part, right? I think everybody's very hopeful that the clearinghouse does a lot and it provides structure. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of athletes out there that are making NIL deals of more than $600. And so how do you provide fair market? And the biggest thing, where are the contracts? There are no contracts, as far as I know, really being signed. And this is not just a Virginia Tech thing. This is across all of college athletics. This is why we've got the transfer portal where guys can transfer, every semester essentially, wherever they want. It's a free agency constantly. So if you've got you read all this stuff about the clearinghouse and whatnot, and you see teams, there were players and schools and whatnot, some of the bigger institutions trying to push NIL deals through right before the settlement passed. How does this all affect college athletics? I think we're kind of just feeling it out day by day a little bit. I think the Hokies are in a pretty good position. They've got good backing, got good funding. I think you're going to see men's basketball specifically, also women's basketball. They're going to probably both, I think, be on the verge of getting to the NCAA tournament this year. They're going to be back to their winning ways. Football can get right. I think the fans will be more willing to kind of help out in this matter, but now you've got revenue sharing. Everybody's on that same level playing field, though. So in the end, I think NIL is still kind of the deciding factor. So it's a very complex matter, a lot of complexity to it. I think I'm very interested to hear what Babcock's thoughts and also the thoughts from the head coaches about how they're going to attack this, because every school's doing it differently. Virginia Tech might allocate more money to men's and women's basketball than other schools do. How do the Hokies stay competitive? You have to offset that with NIL, but of course there's a clearinghouse. So you've got to work around all this. So very, very, very intricate situation.
Well, they could always just bail on the ACC, go independent in football, and join the Big East in basketball, and that way they can play by those rules. But alas, that's not happening anytime soon. What will happen again is at some point we'll connect with David Cunningham of TechSideline.com. No show next Monday because of the College World Series, so it'll be a couple weeks before we reconnect with you, David. Thank you very much, and who knows what'll break in the meantime.
Appreciate it. Hopefully we've got some basketball news to talk about next time we chat.
Yes, that would be exciting, and possibly teasing something to monitor at The Real D. Cunna on Twitter and Instagram and TechSideline.com.
Now to the Virginia Cavaliers.
With JerryRatcliffe.com founder and contributor, Jerry Hootie Ratcliffe. Hootie, great to be speaking with you. This is where I would be reprimanded by this point, and it will only get worse. In journalism or in communications classes, I'm not going to go with talk about because that's pretty lazy, but I'm going to go about in that direction. The House settlement was announced a couple of days ago. It's now official. How does that impact UVA?
Pretty much, pretty heavily, like most schools, I guess. Ed, they'll have $20 million to spend on athletes, and the majority of that, I think, as much as 95%, may go to football and men's basketball, and the rest is to be distributed amongst whatever's left over. But it's a good question because, most schools are probably going to do the same thing except for the ones, and it really benefits, it's supposed to help level things out, but it really benefits the ones that had great NIL programs to begin with, because if you had a $20 million budget or somewhere in that neighborhood, now you've got an extra $20 million, and if you were one of the have-nots and you had $10 million, now you've got 30, and the other are 40, and the other guys have got 40 or more. So I don't know that it's really helped even things out. It's just a complicated issue.
Jerry, it is very complicated. There's not a lot of clarity in terms of directions. And do you ever think we get back to the day where we might be getting under the table cash transactions and cars mysteriously showing up in parking lots registered to aunts and uncles?
Well, this should eliminate most of that, but I don't know how they're going to enforce this new rule that the $20 million house settlement that schools have to play with. They're supposed to be vetting any deal between an athlete and a company of more than $600 in value. And I think Deloitte is the firm appointed to vet all that to make sure everything's up and up. But there's going to be thousands of deals like that pouring in. I don't know how one company can handle that unless they've got a pretty advanced system. So, I'm not very trusting of the system, and that there's not going to be some cheating going on amongst donors at various schools. I just don't know how you monitor that. The NCAA couldn't do it. I don't know how an accounting firm can do it.
Yeah, good luck with that, and good luck when the lawsuits come about players' market value for some type of endorsement being more than whatever they determine it. This is bound to get messier again, but hey, when you don't want to make them employees, get ready for that to unfold. Hootie, we will pivot off of that. You've got these great pieces that you'll drop occasionally at jerryratcliffe.com called Scatter Shooting, and it's musings and thoughts that you have, but they're fantastic pieces. Brian O'Connor, one of them mentioning, and the point you bring up about why he left Virginia for Mississippi State was largely the desire to have a change of scenery. How much are you buying that, or is that really a polite way of saying, let's not go there if he's pressed that there were other reasons why?
Yeah, I was the first person he talked to. It was sometime on last Wednesday, and I talked to him a couple of times, and I think he was just taking the high road. I'm sure that what they dangled in front of him was very rewarding and alluring and complimentary, really. But I think by then he had already, maybe that was the straw that broke the camel's back, but I think by then he had already decided he was leaving. I keep hearing from people with inside knowledge of the program that there's been issues over the last 2-3 years, over the lights, over broadcasting games, over travel, funding, the various things like that. Some people will argue, well, we had plenty of funding at the end, but I think some of that was they made a run when they finally took it seriously that he was leaving and tried to salvage the situation, but it was too little, or not too little, but too late. And I think by that point the frustration had grown to the point where he and his staff were ready to get out of Dodge, and Mississippi State made it awfully easy to do that.
They did, and there's got to be a part as well in life, and I'm sure you've been there before, as many of us have, where if you have to always be asking for something, at some point it gets draining, and it is, you don't need it all the time. It sounds devish, but it's nice every once in a while for someone to come to you and be proactive as opposed to you always having to ask for it, threaten to leave, and ultimately that's how you get what you want accomplished.
I worked for an awful lot of cheapskate publishers in the newspaper business, and only one of them was ever the kind of guy that believed in spending money no matter how much it costs to give the readers great coverage. The rest of them were counting pennies and didn't really care about the reader that much. So, yeah, I've been turned down a lot more than I've been accepted. And, you know how it is when you're leading a department. Sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So I found myself doing that a lot.
It happens regularly and sadly, but what's not sad is the insight. It's fantastic at jerryratcliffe.com. Hootie, thanks for talking some Wahoos today in the Fast Lane. We are off next week because we are carrying the College World Series. The ACC would love for Duke to join Louisville in that tonight. We'll see if that happens. But we appreciate your time today in the Fast Lane, and we'll chat again in a couple of weeks.
Great to be with you, Ed. We'll see you then.
Indeed, Jerry Ratcliffe with us here in part one of Covering the Commonwealth. When we return, more of the same, at least to kick it off with Liberty. Then we will talk some NASCAR and Hillcats baseball. That when we return here in the Fast Lane on the VTRN Sports app and VTRN Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube.
Few things are more majestic than nature as long as it's outside your house. Unfortunately, when wildlife gets inside your chimney, it leads to problems for your chimney and your house. Prevent this problem with Black Goose Chimney Service. They provide one-time solutions to ensure the wildlife stays outside your home. And if you've had wildlife inside your house, Black Goose Chimney Service can deal with the aftermath and make sure they don't return. Call Black Goose Chimney Service and visit them at blackgoose.net.
When you're a discerning gun owner, you value knowledge and honesty. That's what you'll get at Big Boys Guns. With over a decade serving Central and Southwest Virginia, we make the complex easy. Our team experience can help with firearm transfers and 100% electronic process for silencer ownership that is done in-house. And when you know firearms, you know it's honest. That's why we offer accurate appraisals and low prices. Looking to buy, sell, or trade? We make it easy at Big Boys Guns on Route 460 in Blue Ridge.
Sandstone architecture, melodic music, wonders of the world. They're staples of Egyptian and Mediterranean culture. But you didn't have to travel thousands of miles to experience it. Just drive to downtown Cairo. Enjoy food from the entire Mediterranean, blended with the best Egyptian recipes. That means fresh ingredients cooked on a charcoal grill. Downtown Cairo staples include $5 Heroes, and build your own Mediterranean bowl. Experience the taste of the Egyptian and Mediterranean world in your own backyard. Downtown Cairo. Business 29 in Madison Heights and the Grays Mill Shopping Center in Forest.
Hi, I'm Matt with Fleet Feet Roanoke. I've enjoyed working with Ed Lane and the Virginia Talk Radio Network. But when they sold their Roanoke station, I was skeptical the partnership could still provide value. Months later, I'm thankful that Ed took the time to meet with me, discuss the right solutions, and a plan to invite his audience to Fleet Feet Roanoke. Now we're able to build a connection with that audience thanks to Ed's creativity. Stop by and see us at Fleet Feet Roanoke to learn more. We'd love to get to know you.
Email info@virginiatalkradionetwork.com to start growing your business. At Duck Donuts, they understand that for churches, every dollar saved is money that can help serve the church and its mission. That's why they offer specials for every church and church-affiliated organization. At Duck Donuts, a dozen classic donuts are just $10 for your church or organization. That's 33% off the normal price. And a dozen confetti donuts are only $12 for churches and organizations, over 45% off the normal price. Because at Duck Donuts, they want your church money to remain focused on the mission. Duck Donuts, the Wards Road side of the River Ridge Mall in Lynchburg.
Your home is more than just walls and windows. It's where life happens. And at Right Choice Construction, we get that. We're not just builders. We're fathers, mothers, neighbors, just like you. And every nail and every beam reflects our commitment to creating a place you're proud to live in. With Right Choice Construction, you're choosing a team that's been perfecting the art of building for years. So build with us, build with experience, build with quality, build with Right Choice.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the Fast Lane.
What does it mean for? We've asked that question regularly. We'll give you a primer, though, to start part 2 of Covering the Commonwealth.
It's time for your teams and topics. Covering the Commonwealth, a look at teams and topics from around the Commonwealth. Let's start with the Liberty Flames.
It's the topic du jour here in the Fast Lane, at least as it comes to your teams and topics. What does the NCAA House settlement mean for the Liberty Flames in this case? Glad you asked, because the primer is up at aseaofred.com with the latest, but we get a Cliff Notes version right now in the Fast Lane from the founder of aseaofred.com. He's at JC Manson on Twitter himself. John Manson here in the Fast Lane. John, always great when we can catch up with you. Your primer, what does this mean for Liberty, or does it merely just confirm what we knew, that they seem to be, for all intents and purposes, as all in on this as you can get?
Yeah, I think, Liberty is going to be all in, as they have been as an athletic department, really since Ian McCall kind of took over several years ago. So, kind of business status quo, right? Nothing really changes. Just, obviously it does change though, right? Because this House settlement, as I'm sure you've already covered, is going to have some far-reaching and widespread impacts, and really changes college athletics as we know it. I mean, if you would have gone back 10 plus years ago and said that schools would be allowed to pay up to $20 million a year to student athletes, we all would have kind of like had a jaw drop. But in the, aspect of, since NIL came in the last few years, it's not quite as far reaching as we might have once thought. But now, schools are allowed to do this, and of course, do it, legally, right? I mean, I'm sure for decades, teams and schools have been paying players under the table, but now it's all above the table. And, so for Liberty, we might not, as Liberty is a private institution, you can't FOIA them and get information onto the details of, coaches' salaries and game contracts with other schools and things like that. It'll be the same thing with this. We might not know the exact dollar amount Liberty's going to be setting aside for revenue sharing. It might not be publicly reported anytime soon until it's in tax documents and things like that years down the road. But from everything we've heard from Ian McCall and others off the record is, Liberty is striving to be a top Group of 5 program. And so I don't think that would change with this house settlement. And so what does that mean as far as dollar amount that they'll be putting into the revenue sharing year in, year out? We don't really know yet. But once other top G5 teams, start to report on or numbers come out as far as how much they'll be putting into it, I'm sure Liberty will be right in line with those. And one thing we've heard, the American Athletic Conference, the AAC, has reportedly set a minimum for their member schools of, just to spend $10 million over the course of 3 years. So, $3.3 million and some change per year. So that kind of gives you a baseline of where some of the top G5 schools are expected to be. But, again, we're going to have to unpack this over the coming weeks, months, and even years.
John, I like to hear that, at least for the next couple of months, because it gives us something to discuss. That's why I'm rubbing my hands for those that are watching Fastlane Ed Lane on Facebook Live and YouTube, because it really just gives us content until we get to like early August when camp begins and we can start focusing on games themselves. Part of that process, though, are bringing in recruits. I know recruiting in high school in particular does not have the same zest that it did before the transfer portal popped up. But Liberty, they still seem to have made a more conscious effort than a lot of programs to use that as a base building tool for their programs. And this past weekend was the first of these June weekend visits for Liberty. You're the one who keeps us plugged in at aseaofred.com. Those club memberships, by the way, great deals on them at insaneradiodeals.com. For you, what are your takeaways that you can share with us and maybe a preview of what you'll be writing about soon?
Yeah, good question, Ed. June, as it is for most college football programs around the country, is a huge month in recruiting for that next recruiting class of high school prospects, rising seniors. It's no different for Liberty. Liberty's got entered June with the June cycle with 7 commitments in the 2026 class and added an 8th one today. And they had, I believe, 12 prospects on official visits this past weekend. I've already begun doing some research on who they are and reaching out to them to get their insights on their visits, and got the first of many of those updates coming Tuesday morning for ASEA Red Club members. So be looking out for that. But I think, as we saw last year with Liberty, their 3 big June recruiting weekends, they got, around 60% of those roughly to commit. And I think that would be the expectation and plan for Coach Chadwell and his staff again this year. The biggest recruiting weekend was this past weekend, and the next 2 weekends they'll have another good group of prospects coming on campus, including those, first 7 that have committed. 2 of those were, or actually 3 of those were on campus this past weekend. So, Liberty continues to build. Last year had its highest rated recruiting class in school history under Coach Chadwell. And I think as you continue to build off that 2023 conference championship season, 13-0 regular season, and the Fiesta Bowl appearance, I think you'll continue to see those recruiting classes build on top of each other, higher and higher ratings for those classes nationally. And Liberty seems like and sounds like they got off to a good start with that first weekend this past weekend.
John, those players hope to be playing for conference championships and competing for spots in the college football playoff, with Liberty having a chance to get that group of 5 bid. That would mean they would not be in a spot to go to the Bahamas Bowl, which for the second time in 3 years will not even be played in the Bahamas coming up. First of all, the timing of it, let's be real here. Why that bowl game was after Christmas and after New Year's is beyond me, but nobody asked my opinion. Then the facilities, you can comment more on that because you were there, but having heard about how it was structured, not necessarily the best. The Bahamas is great in theory, but the bowl seems like it needs some work in terms of its spot on the calendar and maybe the structure around it for it to be back in the Bahamas and actually have people come to see it there.
Yeah, first of all, with the Bahamas Bowl, you're talking about, one of your last teams, if not the last bowl eligible team out of Conference USA against one of the, last bowl eligible teams out of the MAC. So it's not going to be a team that's, necessarily, garnering national interest or attention. It's not going to be a team that maybe is really having a superb season. Buffalo last year, they probably felt good under their first-year head coach, getting back to a bowl game, kind of on the upswing there in that program. But for Liberty, obviously, it was just kind of like, oh, we're going to another bowl game. So, with that being said, and you throw in the additional travel expenses and trouble of trying to get to the Bahamas, you're just not going to have a large contingent of the fan base of any team traveling to that destination. Although who wouldn't want to spend, Christmas or New Year's in the Bahamas? But, it's just not realistic for your average fan. It's hard to get there. And then, you kind of see that with the Bahamas Bowl giving away free tickets and admission to, the Bahama residents if anyone comes out to the game. So that's who made up most of the crowd. But then add to that the that travel issues, and then the stadium itself. It was originally a track and field complex, and they've done some renovations to it recently, and it needs a lot of work. The field, I think you could probably see on TV, was basically they were playing on the beach. A lot of sand underneath the makeshift grass that had just been planted a few weeks or months prior. So it's just not ideal playing situation. So it makes sense that it's not in the Bahamas. I would be shocked if it ever returned to the Bahamas. I don't think you'll have many teams like a Liberty. It's kind of like the old, the CIT, the CBI in men's basketball is, some schools, it makes sense to go there. But after you've been there and done that, Liberty has turned down those invitations previously because that, as the men's basketball program has aspirations on the NCAA tournament and the NIT as a consolation they would take. So I wouldn't be shocked if, teams like Liberty and others turn down a Bahamas Bowl invitation in the future. So like I said, I don't know. I think the Bahamas Bowl in the Bahamas is probably towards the end. And who do we know? Maybe this last Bahamas Bowl featuring Liberty and Buffalo is the last bowl game played in the Bahamas for the foreseeable future.
Appropriate analogy with Liberty, but pour one out. Pour one out for the Bahamas Bowl being in the Bahamas might have helped again to have had that before Christmas or certainly before New Year's when people would actually travel rather than when all of that was wrapped up and then wondering why is nobody showing up after all the travel has been done for the holiday season. Just a random thought, John. Last one for you. You tweeted this at JC Manson on Twitter. Liberty released their 2026 women's basketball slate, and it featured dates that are coming, or features dates. Duke, a second straight trip to the LBG. They will be coming up to Bel Air at Liberty Arena. But so too will East Carolina and Richmond, road trips, JMU, George Mason. John, you had a great tweet about how you'd love to see this for men's basketball. I know there's a bit of tongue-in-cheek in there because you and I both know how the schedule can be a challenging one to set up for men's basketball. But again, how much is this, at least from a women's side, we'll take it from this angle today in the fast lane, how much is this a boon building off of last year, the fact that Kerry Green, they've done this before, but now you build off a good season. This seems like a really good way to keep that interest northward for Liberty women's hoops.
Yeah, I mean, it's a terrific non-conference schedule, and hopefully that tweet doesn't take away from the successful non-conference schedule Coach Green and his staff's put together. I mean, getting an ACC program to come in to Liberty Arena is always going to be a win, and especially a program like Duke coming off an Elite Eight appearance, and obviously a second straight trip for them to Liberty Arena, which is kind of interesting. But then you throw in like those other games, those four other games you mentioned, four other regional mid-major type of programs that have had a lot of success in the past. And, Liberty's getting two of them at home and two of them on the road. And kind of in jest said would be great to have a similar non-conference schedule for men's basketball, which we talked about last week, and getting NC State on the docket and College of Charleston and FAU at home, and then that tournament down in Orlando for Coach McKay and the Flames is a good start to their non-conference schedule. So they could end up having the best non-conference schedule they've had in some time. But, it was kind of ties into what we talked about last week where, we'd love to see the men play, home and homes with, East Carolina, JMU, Richmond, some of these teams that we're seeing the women play. That's kind of what you have to do to get some, in my opinion, to get some noteworthy games on your schedule right now. Because, like we talked about last week, you can't get the quad one opponents on your schedule much. Certainly not on your home floor. So to get some good quality home games for the men's basketball season ticket holders, you'll have to do some of the things like the women are doing to get some of those home and homes with those reputable mid majors in the region. And again, like we talked about last week, it was so many that there are so many within that 4 to 5 hour bus trip type of situation where you could schedule home and homes. And kudos to Coach Green and his staff for getting it done for men's basketball or for women's basketball, and hopefully the men can do likewise.
John, thank you for the insight today in the fast lane. One can at least hope, as we beep that word out always in the fast lane. In all seriousness, we love the insight at aseaofred.com. We're off next week because of the College World Series, so we'll chat again in 2 weeks and look forward to it.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Ed.
Our pleasure. John Manson, aseaofred.com, with us here in the fast lane on W227BG Timberlake, WVGM AM Lynchburg, WMNA Gretna, Danville, Southside.
Now to NASCAR.
The race of the year. Was it or wasn't it? Michael Massey, frontstretch.com NASCAR reporter, with us here in the fast lane. Michael, great to be speaking with you. Big picture, was that the race of the year yesterday?
That's hard to say. First off, thanks for having me on, Ed. It's tough to say that Michigan race. It was really great. I'd definitely put it top three. The Coke 600 was pretty good as well. So I think you'd have to argue between those two and maybe Coda for like what the best race is. But if you're a Virginia sports fan, I think you'd be happy with the result yesterday with Denny Hamlin getting the victory, and it was exciting. It was definitely the best Michigan race I can remember in quite some time.
It was really good, and there have been some good ones at Michigan, which is really the exciting part of it. First of all, Denny Hamlin gets the victory. Fuel mileage. There wasn't a lot that was left in there, but the fuel mileage part gets criticized. How much is it, and I've used this analogy, and for those watching at Fastlane Ed Lane on Facebook Live and YouTube, you can watch me mock put deodorant on. There are races where fuel mileage is kind of the deodorant for what is not quality racing. True or false? That was not yesterday. Yesterday was adding on to quality racing, which is why Michigan has gotten great reviews.
Yes, that was the perfect way to put it. It was, even if everyone could have made it at the end, I think just with the way the cars had enough drag to where the leader never really got away. Like William Byron led 98 of the 200 laps, but it didn't feel like it, because normally when somebody leads almost half the race, it kind of means it's a stinker. But in that case, he never got away, and it was one of those races where you really didn't know who was going to win. Byron could have won. Carson Hocevar looked like he was going to get his first win at his home track yesterday, and ultimately Denny Hamlin, out of nowhere, hadn't been up there all day, he gets the W. So, yeah, that's what you love to see in a race.
I loved it. I thought that was a really good part, again, as I've already gotten my usher on in the fast lane, confessing that after watching the epic tennis match in the French Open final, I listened to it, but they do a great job. And selfish plug, Alex Hayden of the Motor Racing Network will join us Tuesday at 5:45 p.m. right here in the fast lane. But the overall racing at Michigan and the various strategies that complemented it. How much do you like the fact that the Liberty University driver, although it wasn't a sponsor yesterday, of William Byron, they basically said, you know what, there's no point in doing points racing. We're already locked into the playoffs. Let's go for broke with the win. Carson Hocevar wanted that strategy as well. My guy, Ty Gibbs, who, by the way, you were a little down on him heading into the race, and he was a top 5 car all day, Michael. Do you need to get your just friends on and ask?
Is more than saying sorry.
I mean, do you need to ask for a little forgiveness for that? Jokes aside about Ty Gibbs and everything else, how much did you like the fact that you had multiple drivers who said, you know what, I value the win more, and therefore I'm willing to risk it for a win, which only adds to the strategy?
That's what you want. I think that's what NASCAR wanted when they went to this win in your in system, where in the past, Byron he's leading the points. He might have just slowed it on down, accepted like a third place finish, fourth place finish, whatever, just to have a good points day and pad that championship lead. But instead, he ran out of gas going for the win, which I would rather run out of gas, and Steve Letarte put this excellently on the Amazon Prime broadcast. I'd rather run out of gas, going for the win, than finish second with plenty of fuel in it. And hey, that's my knock. Ty Gibbs had a good run, but that's my knock on him this week is that he finished the race on fuel and finished in the top 5. If he pushes a little harder, maybe he has enough fuel to actually get up there and win the thing. So that's just something to think about, Ed.
It is, but he went off on that strategy on the radio. We will play it tomorrow so we have enough time to get the beat buttons ready because, Ty Gibbs, he gets us, of course, many of us who often slip up with the tongue as well. Somebody who doesn't slip with the tongue except when he is disparaging to Ty Gibbs on various front stretch podcasts, that being Michael Massey. He has been generous enough to recap that race today here in the Fast Lane. Michael, seriousness aside, we appreciate your time. We love catching up. And we look forward to doing it again soon.
Yes, sir, Ed. It's always a pleasure to be on. And, hey, I am excited for Mexico City this weekend, watching that race there.
You and me both. It should be a lot of fun indeed.
And last but not least, or maybe this, the Lynchburg Hillcats.
A colleague of our very own TJ Wilkerson, they spend time together in the press box. Although maybe you're not exactly together in the press box because if the PA announcer is literally I wouldn't say screaming. I've been around some who scream into the microphone. TJ just enthusiastically talks into the microphone over at City Stadium. But that's how TJ does it, which is why you need to go to InsaneRadioDeals.com and grab your single game tickets with a food voucher, good for chicken strips, a hot dog, or a burger, and get those at a special rate for general admission or reserved seats, including this weekend's homestand against the Carolina Mudcats. So you can go over there and hear the dulcet tones of our very own TJ Wilkerson. But, snarky comments aside, we mentioned this Hillcats team, and now coming off the Fredericksburg series, the ability to find ways to keep that momentum going looked a little dicey early against Salem. The offense sputtered in those first 2 games. They lost 8-3, then they had a 2-1 victory. They they couldn't outslug Salem on Thursday, but they rallied with 3 straight wins, ultimately taking that series 4-2 against Salem and keeping themselves in position to win the first half of the Carolina League crown. Coming up, again, that big series this weekend against Carolina. And that is one thing that we get to discuss right now with Jason Prill, colleague of our very own TJ Wilkerson, who is generous enough to join us in the Fast Lane. It's not always going to be pretty, Jason, much like, it's not as pretty as, your press box colleague, TJ Wilkerson, who, he and his lovely fiance, if she's ever up there, they've got to be fantastic to see. But baseball, at times, it's not that way. But when you can win in spite of that, and the Hillcats found a way to pull out 4 of 6, 4-2 series win against Salem, how big was that? That this was not necessarily the best the Hillcats had shown like their series against Fredericksburg, but they found a way to cobble it together and still keep themselves in position for a first half crown.
Yeah, I think it's pretty impressive. We keep talking about Hillcat baseball, and it's just grinding out victories. It's finding ways to win that are unconventional. It's going the extra mile and doing the things that other teams aren't willing to do. The other night when we were watching the game, Lynchburg scored their first run without a hit because of a wild pitch. Had a guy get aboard, work his way around, and then score because the pitcher couldn't command his fastball. And that's just the way that the Hillcats have been able to win. And at the end of the day, it does not matter how you win. All it matters is that you do win. And right now, they find themselves a game out of first place behind the Carolina Mudcats, who are coming in after dropping 4 of 6 in their own homestand. So it's going to be an interesting series, and the Hillcats have the upper hand right now because they're on a hot streak. They're 1 game back, and I'm really excited for what's to come at Bank of the James Stadium.
As the Major League Baseball draft comes up in the next couple of weeks, and of course you head toward the summer stretch, rosters will expand in Major League Baseball as well as the trade deadline popping up. We're entering that time where a lot of these players may be moving on within the Cleveland Indians or Guardians organization. Got to get $5 for the virtual swear jar there. But within the organization or maybe even to other franchises, how much pride is there in the locker room of this Carolina series? And even if some of these guys move on to different ventures, they can be part of a championship team in their half with the Lynchburg Hillcats.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride when it comes to trying to win a championship, even in minor league baseball. You talk with some of the coaches and the manager and all that kind of stuff. They'll tell you that it's not about winning, it's about development. But you really get down into the nitty gritty on it, and it's all about winning. The guys just want to win, and that's part of development. You have to learn how to win as you make it up the ranks of minor league baseball. And I know at High A last year in Lake County, they won a championship, and players who were there for only half a season who got called up to Akron, they still got a championship ring. So these guys know that even if they're not with Lynchburg to finish the season, they still have a chance to win a ring, even if they don't win it while in Lynchburg this year. So they have to do everything they can the next week and a half to try to get into that playoff spot. And there's a lot of pride in that, just to be able to say that they got there and they have a chance to walk home and leave this season with some new jewelry.
We take pride in the insight from Jason Prill. He's at JasPrill19 on Twitter and Instagram. Jason, thank you for talking some Hillcats today in the Fast Lane. We'll do it again in a couple of weeks because we're off next week with the College World Series.
Absolutely, Ed. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can see everybody out there at the ballpark this week. The Hillcats need everybody there.
Indeed. Grab those tickets now at InsaneRadioDeals.com with a $10 food voucher for reserved or general admission tickets. Meanwhile, that does it for us today in the Fast Lane. On to Make It Rain in progress, and then tonight, 7:30 p.m., Stanley Cup Final, big Game 3 coming up, Edmonton at Florida. Who gets the series lead? Find out. We'll discuss that and more tomorrow in the Fast Lane.
Message and data rates may apply. Hey, Dan, haven't seen you around the gym for a while. Yeah, I've really fallen off. Since I turned 40, I just don't get